You are listening to New Theory Radio. Theory Radio.
Welcome to another edition of New Theory Radio here on iTunes and CFRE. My name is Nav Nanwa. I'm your host. This is New Theory Radio, the show where we theorize on all things current affairs, pop culture, and everyday life. And I'm very excited to be joined by some new group of panelists, two individuals that really inspire me. They're kind of the youth that I've been really looking up to when it comes to this new level of grind that I'm seeing, both within the GTA as well as here locally in either Brampton or Mississauga. And I'm very excited to have them on. I'm going to start to my right. She is a total juggernaut when it comes to the startup world. She has a brand new, somewhat new initiative called Our Wave Hub, which is really taking over. And they actually have an event next week, which we'll talk about in just a few moments. She's someone that is definitely a future leader here in the entrepreneur tech space. I'm very excited to have her because I know eventually her rate's going to go up and she won't be able to do these types of interviews. My good friend Prieeyya Kaur Kesh. Prieeyya, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime, Prieeyya. I'm very excited to pick your brain on a couple of topics. And then sitting right beside you, another individual who, how would you describe what you do, Astawa?
I'm the best, man. I build things.
Yeah, he builds things. He's an entrepreneur. He's very active in the Brampton entrepreneur scene. He's always having meetings with very important people, and I'm also happy that he made time for me to be on this show, and he also showed up with a box of Popeyes. it was only for himself and not anybody else. Yeah, it definitely fits our first topic, which is the Canada's new food guide. My buddy Astawa Alam. Astawa, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Yes, now of course. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. I'm really excited. You guys are like the new generation of like youth that. Okay, I can still call you guys youth, right? Yeah. But like this new generation of just motivated movers and shakers that are, really doing a lot in the community and really changing the narrative when it comes to different, ways things are happening, specifically in the city of Brampton. When you think about, some of the partnerships the city's embarking with, Ryerson University, as well as the growing population of entrepreneurs that we're seeing coming out of the city. You guys are really doing a great job in sort of fostering that. And I thought it'd be very good to have you both on the show because there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about that we're going to discuss on today's episode. But, first and foremost, Astawa, how was the Popeyes that you ate? Was it good?
Man, I got my protein serving as recommended by a 2019 Canada Food Guide right now, right there. So I'm just doing my best, just
don't fall asleep on me, man, on this episode because I know how crazy a full Popeyes plate could be. It's actually my favorite fried chicken, I'll be honest.
Yeah, it's solid.
I love
it. It gets too greasy. Sometimes Mary Brown's is like a nice medium where it's nice, it's wholesome, but you don't feel like garbage afterwards.
I don't think I've ever had Mary Brown's before.
Really?
Yeah.
It's solid.
And what do you recommend there?
Just chicken, man.
Yeah, just
what do you mean?
It's like a bucket of chicken.
Like they have like those chicken poppers too, which are like those like little nugget kind of things.
Really?
I love it. I'm a huge fan of popcorn chicken.
Wow. Yeah. Prieeyya, do you like Mary? Was it Mary?
Mary Brown's.
Mary Brown's.
I actually don't think I've tried Mary Brown's.
Really?
Yeah, I like Popeyes though.
Oh, Popeyes is sick.
We used to eat a lot of KFC back in Malaysia.
Yeah.
And it's not as big here, but Popeyes is good.
You know what? I actually was a big KFC eater back in the day too, but I think I've converted to Popeyes, especially because there's a Popeyes close to my condo, and my wife had never ate Popeyes before we moved into our condo.
Yo, so Canada is the only, I think Canada, almost all of Canada's like Popeyes are halal, and like in New York it's not.
Yeah.
And whenever I tell someone that, they're blown away.
Really, eh?
Crazy.
Is it because there was a big Muslim franchisee that got involved with Popeyes? I think that's what I heard.
Maybe.
Yeah, there used to be a Popeyes in Bramley City Center that my sister's friends' parents used to own, and that's when I found out about Popeyes being halal. And I think a lot of it was done because don't quote me on this, or don't fact check it, but I think there was a big franchisee that was Muslim that bought a ton of Popeyes, and we almost lost somebody here in the studio. And I think that's what sort of started it, because I guess he had a lot of connections in the community. But
makes sense.
Hey man, it's good chicken. You can't deny it.
Of course.
But that's a great segue to our first topic. And like you mentioned, Astawa, eating your protein. Canada's new food guide came out this week, and the guide specifically promotes that Canadians should consider plant-based diets, which you didn't do earlier. But it's interesting because as much as we're seeing this being more prominent, and the fact that the government is taking quite the stand with this food guide regarding the choices that Canadians should be making when it comes to their food. I'm curious. All three of us are of our South Asian descent. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of
green.
Yeah, a lot of green involved in our cuisine.
Yeah.
Our cuisine is very tasty, but it's also been very detrimental to our populations.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about a lot of people in the baby boomers who are unfortunately are suffering from diabetes and heart disease now. It's just one of those things that our generation is looking very closely at diet. So one of the things I kind of want to just open up is what is your theory on how the government went about putting out this food guide and putting out this recommendation around plant-based diets? And do you feel like you're going to start to see a ripple effect across the country in regards to people being more cognizant about what they're consuming? And maybe Prieeyya, will begin with you.
Wow. Well, loaded question. I would start by saying, Mom, you're right.
Yeah.
But I was reading some articles about how the food guide is regarded across the board as one of the leading sort of recommendations of how to go about health and wellness in Canada specifically. I think you're totally right when you say our generation is a bit more conscious about what we consume and how we go about like health and wellness and incorporating some sort of balanced diet with fitness. I don't know how it's going to necessarily, or how fast the adoption is going to be of the report. Right?
Yeah.
I think people will read it and accept it and maybe try it out for a while.
Yeah.
And my theory, I think, is that they'll just still do what they do.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's true.
People are hard to change. I think it's a really good piece of reference that the government puts out. So to give you some context, I grew up in Malaysia, and over there, although being of South Asian descent, we ate a lot of Chinese and Malaysian food or cuisine that was very heavy on like fresh green leafy vegetables.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Totally.
And maybe that's a cultural thing just where we are too, right? Like it's Canadian culture to have a lot of carbs like pizza and pasta.
Yeah.
And
Toast.
and toast and just
breakfast food,
just
man.
Popeye boxes of chicken.
Yeah, I know. Well, a lot of it's convenience, right?
Yeah, it's all convenience because everyone here is so busy.
Yeah.
Right? So I think where I stand with this is I think it's a great reference and a great direction in terms of recommending where we should be health and wellness wise.
Yeah.
I just don't know how fast or how much that will be taken into consideration at a critical mass within Canada. Yeah,
I know that's a fair point because, ultimately I think the food guide was very effective at providing that education. But to your point, I find that people, would read it, take a look, consider it, and then the next day they're back to having their cheeseburger or back to eating indulgent food.
Yeah.
Astawa, Mr. Popeyes, what are your thoughts on this? We're not gonna let that go, man. That's your nickname on today's episode, Mr. Popeyes.
I think the new food guide is a response to trends that we've been seeing. Like anyone on Instagram or the internet has been seeing so much more activity around people promoting plant-based diets, veganism, and just a fit life in general too. Like we see those hashtags all the time: gym life, fit life. So I think this is more of a response to what's been going on, and it's also interesting to think about how this fits into the larger societal trends we've been seeing with global warming and like people urging consumers to consume less meat because it's bad for the environment.
Yeah.
Right? So it just fits into so many other things that are happening, right? So I think this is more of a response than the Canada Food Guide, I feel like the Canada Food Guide is kind of redefining how it fits into our lives. In that, when it came out in 1982 or whenever it did, people were at a very different time in their lives. Like, we didn't have access to the information that we have now, and because we have so much more access to information, the Canada Food Guide doesn't have to educate us on like what to eat or what's good for us. It's more their place now to curate and kind of lead the conversation. So they understand that no one's looking to us for the information, but we can kind of be the domain authority on who they look to for recommendations. So I think with those factors, they realize that this is the right step to take for us.
No, I think that's a fair point. And one thing I want to ask the both of you is, how much of this should be directed towards specific culture subsets in Canada? Because I find that, especially with the first generation, new immigrants that are here, it's a lot harder for them to change their habits, mainly because, and I think a lot of that is not out of stubbornness. I think a lot of that is out of education. And I don't know, I think from what I saw, like, this food guide isn't available in any other language. It's only English and French.
Ooh, interesting.
So that's a really good point.
So I'm wondering, like, how much of this do you think would be receptive to a South Asian population, or even, Asian population, regarding this education? Because, I look at Canada being so diverse. I'm finding that it'd be really cool if they were able to, really go deep in this food guide and maybe provide, alternate recipe suggestions for some of the food that we eat at home.
You're alluding to a larger point that the food guide as it is right now might not be accessible to the people that need it most. Yeah. Right? Like, in Brampton, for example, I might be wrong, but Brampton has one of the largest, the largest, if not one of the largest groups of diabetic patients in Canada.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes, yeah.
And it's not a mistake that Brampton's mostly South Asians too. Yeah. We have that cuisine which leads to being diabetic and everything else that comes with it too. So it's definitely a disservice that, I'm sure that, of course, going to translate it into Hindi, Punjabi, etc., all these other languages. But they need to, if the larger goal of the Canada Food Guide is to promote a healthier lifestyle and make sure that people are living longer, then it should 100% be more accessible to everybody else too. And people do have a hard time getting up their habits. Like, my dad's not going to give up like what he's used to eating.
Oh, same, right? Here. Yeah.
Like, they're comfortable with that, and at an older age too, for older generations, you're stuck in your ways, and it's hard to change habits.
Totally. Right? As much as a younger generation, we try to influence them. Yeah. I think a lot of it is, hey, I've been eating like this for so long. It's hard for me to change that after, so many years. Prieeyya, what are your thoughts?
I think there are two things at play. One is that different generations accept and sort of analyze information differently, right? So the distribution of this information to, like, the medium is really important to consider, because majority of this stuff happens online. Yeah. But majority of our parents aren't online.
That's a really good point.
Do you know what I mean? So sometimes this information doesn't even get to them. Yeah. And I maybe that's one factor. The other factor is people our age, so people within the 18 to 30-year-old bracket.
18?
I'm not. Leave me alone.
Wait, okay. Did you say 18 to, what was it? 18?
Like 18 to 30. Okay. Let's call these.
I have 2 more months before I get out of that range. So.
Let's call these guys the youth groups.
By the time I'm 31, that's it. It's over.
Officially.
But anyways, my point was the 18 to 30-year-old demographic is probably going to be more receptive to information like this than people who are younger or older than that, right? Totally. So is this piece of information exclusive to swaying the opinion of young people within certain cultures, or is it meant to hit and access everyone in Canada?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, I think the adoption would be faster and higher with the younger audience because it's easier for them to consume. It's distributed in the
medium, and they care more about it too.
But right? I also think they were mindful about that when they chose the visual for it. Like the old food guide was literally just like a graph of like little 4 quarters of like different food groups,
and there's like a sun in the middle.
And there's a sun. You always got to start with vitamin D.
You got to get your vitamin D before you eat anything
else.
Yes.
But now with the new plate portion, they literally show you like half your plate should be greens and the other half should be one quarter proteins and one other quarter something else that I don't
I
care
think there's
about.
some validity behind that though. Like, and maybe another layer to consider all this information is self-awareness. Like individually knowing what food groups you're good with and not good with.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to see a sway in this obesity metric that's being measured.
That's great that you brought that up, because especially because it's almost the end of January, so maybe a lot of New Year's resolutions are out the window already. But one of mine was to eat more fruits and greens, because I find that I do sort of gravitate to the ones that I like, and sometimes like my wife would buy other ones that I don't really eat too much, mainly because I never used to consume it, so I don't really know how to eat it. Like I
don't know how to eat kiwis unless they're like cut up in
literally like, and even when it comes to like kale as an example, like I always thought kale would be just tossed in a smoothie, and then when I actually went online, I was looking up different recipes. I was like, I can pan fry kale, like I can throw bacon on it, like
you can bake it too.
Yeah,
you can make like
I make kale chips. And and all of a sudden I was thinking to myself, why was I not doing this earlier? Like, this is amazing.
Because it wasn't curated for you.
Yeah.
But if it's being curated now by a big authority, by a big governing body, then it's easier for you.
Yeah,
you always had access to that information, but you never knew how to use it.
Yeah, definitely.
So
definitely.
Again, like that's how I think the role of this body is changing as well.
You know, one stat that I do want to bring up is, as of 2017, the Public Health Agency of Canada reported that 64% of Canadian adults over the age of 18 are overweight or obese. And 60% of children, this is quite alarming, aged 5 to 17 are overweight and obese. So, for me, when you put that into context, I think maybe this food guide was a bit of a wake-up call, saying, hey, look, we do have a problem. Majority of our population is overweight or obese. And those are two definitions. Like, it's easy to be overweight because there's always these regulations put online about here's, your height and here's how much
your BMI, et cetera.
All of that. And that's also fascinating, too, is, a lot of people who do work out get very hung up on weight. But BMI, I think, is probably the most important because, I think your body mass index ratio is definitely
unique to you.
It is definitely unique. Because if you go to the gym and you work out and you take protein, you're going to gain weight, but that weight will probably be in muscle mass, and you'll assume, oh damn, it's not working, and you give up. Yeah. And I think that education needs to be provided as well.
Yeah, and I think how the food guide now is being curated kind of alludes to that too, right? More that, like, even with the food guide as it is now, not everyone needs to be eating 1/4 proteins. Like, you might need more protein too, right? Again, like Prieeyya said, like, it's a guideline that you should start with.
Totally.
Like in 1982, we started with the sun. Now we start with.
But he's not gonna let that go.
I'm just picturing 1982. Everyone's outside
It's
getting
just
like soaking in. Like,
sun salutation.
hold on, Sally, you gotta come in.
It's like, hey dog, I'm overweight, so go get more sun first, and then talk to me.
But yeah, I think what was the saying? It's still gonna come down to like who you are and all that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely. It is shocking, and I think part of the purpose of this is to be a little bit of a shock and a wake up call, and to tell people like, "Yo, you're doing this wrong."
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I think it's overall a net positive, but again, for the individual, right, or people in the community to actually see change, like, there's a lot of self-awareness at play, because this is not like a black and white piece of information that applies to everyone. It's a good reference that applies differently to everyone.
It does.
You know what I mean? 100%. So it's on the individual in different communities and different cultures to take that initiative and, I guess, superimpose this reference to how they, like, their own individual lifestyle.
Did you guys ever have the Canada Food Guide like pinned to your fridge? When
yeah. And now that I think of it, and I think it was the Sun one. Because I remember as a kid, I feel like it was sent to you via mail or something like that, and I remember having it. And I remember also seeing it at school too, like in the cafeteria.
An interesting note is that I'm sure there's an actual stat about this, but a lot of children from that elementary school age range, they get a lot of their nutrients and food throughout the day from schools, either breakfast club in the morning or cafeterias at lunchtime too. And those cafeterias always kind of portion the food and pick what's served according to the food guide.
Yeah.
So if the kids right now, I forget what the stat was, but 60% of them are like obese, we might see that number change in the next couple of decades, right?
It's so fascinating. I remember in high school, and this was when I aged myself, like 2002, 2006. Man, if I ever had the opportunity to buy my lunch, I was eating McDonald's, I was eating Subway.
It was a treat.
And the calf, I was eating like the burgers, the patties was something I get in between. Like I remember just eating all of that and not really thinking about that, like think about the nutrition. And then I remember when I worked in brand marketing, and specifically when I worked in chocolate, the company that I was working for had a firm rule around you couldn't market the product to anyone above 14, meaning that a lot of partnerships that would reach out to us that geared towards the student demographic we couldn't do. And then I heard that we were losing a lot of volume because a lot of schools were removing vending machines out of their.
That's so interesting. So there's a CBC article about the food guide. Obviously, one of the things that they kept talking about was how meat and dairy lobbyists were trying to make this not happen.
Yes.
So what my theory is going to happen with this new food guide is that, because we have this reference as visuals are imprinted into people's minds. They're going to see that, and every time they go to can I swear?
Yeah.
Anytime they go to Osmond,
we're not live yet, so it's the podcast version. You can say whatever you want.
They're gonna, they might think twice about getting chicken and beef on the rocks or whatever.
Yeah.
They might think twice before they get a Big Mac because they have that visual in their head. So I 100% believe that we're going to see a big decline in the meat and dairy market because of this.
Yeah.
And as a result, these people are going to go out of business and farmers are going to lose their jobs, et cetera. And all this is going to happen because of this one food guide.
And it's another example I'll bring up from my corporate life. So when I worked for a meat company, there was a study that had come out around processed meat and that leading to cancer. And I remember that causing a huge uproar amongst all of our senior execs to the point where they had to have a town hall with us to reaffirm, this
Fake
is not
news.
true. Like, if you eat processed meat, like for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks, yes, for for 5 years, and maybe your cancer chances will increase. But it was so much on the defensive front.
Right.
That I think to your point, I think that's why you're seeing a lot of meat companies venture into plant-based proteins because they know that's where the consumer trend's going. Switching gears, let's talk more pop culture topics. There's two things I want to talk to you about that were pretty newsworthy this week. The Oscar nominations came out on Monday, I believe, or Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday, earlier this week. And some news there. Female directors, once again, got snubbed from the Best Director category. Something that has been, quite the battle for females within the arts industry. But, what I wanted to pick both your brains on is, this is also, I think, very reminiscent or very applicable to other industries as well. And then I also want to talk about the FYRE Festival documentary, both on Netflix. None of us have watched the Hulu one because we don't have access to Hulu here in Canada. But let's talk about that specifically around how they portrayed entrepreneur / startup culture and just the how people can get a little greedy when it comes to some of the initiatives that are put forward and all that. But going back to female directors getting snubbed, so it was a very prominent topic of discussion when the Oscar nominations had come out. Every single year there's a lot of great female directors that come out with fantastic movies. Unfortunately, none of them were recognized this year. And what I wanted to pick your brain on is, what are your thoughts on this? Some arguments I've seen online that I want to dispute. One was, again, this is just the Academy being sexist as always. And, even if you look at the track record of how many directors have actually won the Best Director award that were female, I believe only 5 women have won in the total 91 years of the Oscars, which is crazy. Another argument that's least popular, but I've seen a lot of people latch onto it on social media, was what if the movies themselves weren't as good as the other movies that were nominated? Do we have to be in a position where no matter what, everything that we do, we need to make sure that we're equally representing, everything? And so Prieeyya, let's ask you, what are your thoughts on this? And from an arts industry standpoint, but also when it comes to business industries in general, like, do you think this is still a recurring problem, and how do you think this should have been addressed?
Wow, these are all loaded questions.
Hey, that's what we do here. Give us your theories.
I don't think there's one specific answer to this. My theory on women in any industry really is, I think it starts with exposure, right? Like, I'm not sure if we live in a society where like young girls and guys are exposed to the same types of career prospects. And it starts there. And the reason I say that is because the reason we don't have enough female in STEM or females in tech, or this whole women getting snubbed at the Oscars issue, is because there are not enough women taking initiative and sort of having the opportunity to climb that ladder.
You know what? That's a really good point, because this article that I read in Vanity Fair talks about Greta Gerwig, who directed a movie, who was nominated last year for a movie called Lady Bird, which is actually a really good movie. It's currently on Netflix if you haven't seen it. But according to a lot of people that were interviewed for this article, they said that Greta Gerwig actually last year, to your point, was purposely like going out and being seen and going to all the film festivals and like doing a lot of PR, and she had a campaign. Like typically around TIFF time, that's when a lot of these directors and movies have like what they call a campaign, and they mix and mingle, and they really try to get themselves out there.
Right.
And a lot of people said, you know, to your point, Prieeyya, that a lot of the directors this year either couldn't afford to have a campaign because of just resources, or they just, again, there was just more preferential treatment made to, you know, a lot of the males who were nominated.
Unfortunately, I think my observation is that we live in a society that in a lot of ways takes into consideration perception.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So if you're perceived as someone who's seen everywhere and doing things and taking initiative, you'll probably be your chances of being considered for awards and recognition is significantly more than someone who isn't, right? But again, the disparity there is that I don't know if there's stats to back this, but I think that males just have more guts in a way where they put themselves out there and position themselves in a way to leverage this perception game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think still there are a lot of things that can be said about how assessments are done. I think there maybe is some room. I'm a big believer of idea meritocracy as a concept that Ray Dalio speaks about. And idea meritocracy can be combined with other factors that maybe will make it a more holistic assessment or evaluation method. And I don't know enough personally about the Oscars procedures and how they evaluate stuff, but I think it starts with exposure. It starts that it starts at home, that where we're brought up in a culture that doesn't necessarily encourage females to take risks, go out of the box, build stuff, right? Like and I think that we're slowly seeing that shift. And I speak from experience when I say that when you are a female that is trying to do stuff in the community or trying to build something, right? Your pressure at home is a lot.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Totally.
And maybe that's a generational perception thing as well, that because the generation that our parents grew up in saw majority of the females in the community as subordinates to the men, right?
Yeah, no, I agree.
But we live in a time where there's abundant. I think there's so many opportunities out there, but we need to start like exposing females or more females and empowering them, right? There's also some sort of rivalry between women where one succeeds, right? There's some sort of competition or unspoken competition where if it's a men's game and you're the only woman in the game and other women start, I don't know, start competing in the same game, that now there's women.
There's less for you.
Yeah, there's less for you.
Or perceived less.
But I don't think that's true. I truly believe that there's enough of success out there for anyone willing enough to go chase it.
No, that's a really good point.
But yeah, Astawa, what do you think?
Yeah, and before you jump in, the one thing I do want to emphasize here is it's quite fascinating to see how this played out, considering how 2018 was really around the Me Too movement and Time's Up, specifically in the arts and culture movie world. Like, it was pretty much, you were seeing a lot of females taking a stand for the mistreatment that they've been given in this industry. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, fast forward to now, a big category like Best Director, there's like no representation. Astawa, what are your thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts, man.
Hey, please provide them.
Do you remember what like Muhammad Ali used to say when he'd be on interviews and people would ask him, "Why are you wearing all this gold and like why you have all these cars?" He said, "Look, if I don't stunt, if I don't have these watches and these rings and these cars and all that, no one's gonna listen to me. Yeah, I have to have these things because I'm a minority. Like if I don't have these things, these markers, quote unquote, of success, no one's gonna listen to me." And that kind of goes back to, I forget the woman's name, but why she was doing that campaign, why she was going out and being seen.
Greta Gerwig.
Yeah, like she needed to do that so people could recognize, like, yo, she has all the markers of success. She's out here doing things. And I think, I mean, it sucks that you need to do that, but I feel like that is necessary for minorities to be doing, or they need to be doing that to get to a place where the higher ups or the powers that be kind of start recognizing them and say, okay, cool, yeah, I'll give you a shot. Because, as much as we hate, as much as we wish it wasn't like this, our world is based on perception, right? If you look busy, if you look successful, you got the cars, you got the watch, all that, you're probably going to get more meetings, more deals and all that. So that's my first thought. My second thought is the representation thing is a catch-22. Because if you don't have women winning, then you don't have little girls looking up to them. And if you don't have little girls going into filmmaking, you don't have girls winning. Yeah. So it's a chicken and egg thing. It's a catch-22 thing. And I think problems like that take a long time to get fixed. But it starts with, it's interesting. So with the whole Me Too stuff and speaking to women in tech as well, last year I had the opportunity to go to a conference called Move the Dial. Okay. And it was all centered around promoting more women leaders in tech. Yeah. And one point which really stuck out to me was that the organizers really urged the need for sponsorship opposed to mentorship. So what they meant by that was that, getting coffees with leaders and all that and giving them tips and everything is nice. But if you really want to see true growth in a certain minority group that's underrepresented, you need to put your dollars there. So if we have these women who are powerful putting more dollars behind younger women to come up and make movies and get recognized and run campaigns of whatever they're interested in, then I think we'll start to see a shift. If the money goes where there's a lack of representation, I think we'll start to see a shift in who is coming out. And of course, like all award shows, like the Grammys, like whatever award show, the Oscars are political. Yeah, right. It's still a subjective opinion about, I think this movie is good. I think this movie is worth an award. Yeah. It's still
well, some would say, and as much as I loved the movie last year, and changing gears on this topic a little bit, that Black Panther being in the conversation for Best Picture and some of the other nominations that it was able to get was a political move to combat what the Oscars were doing last year, which was they were going to introduce a brand new category called the Best Popular Film category.
Oh, you mean Best Urban?
Yeah, something weird which would have recognized, which would have been an award that would recognize big time blockbusters, and people were saying this is a category that they're going to put Black Panther in, just so Black Panther doesn't get recognized as a best real picture. Movie, yeah. And there was a huge uproar against it. A lot of people were like, no, this doesn't make any sense because a movie's a movie, and ultimately you shouldn't just make a category to try to appease a demographic. And, it's also fascinating because for the last few years, a lot of people have also played with the idea, and I know the MTV Music Awards did this last year, where they got rid of the gender awards and they made it just like, for example, Best Actor would be male and females going up against each other.
Love it.
And they were saying, why do we need to separate it by gender? Because the ideology is so old when everyone in the workplace is being compared, in the same vein, right? Or at least we hope so.
Yeah. So what I think they were trying to do there is that they were trying to show like, they're trying to suggest that we're all playing on a level playing field when we're not, because women are coming up differently than men are coming up, and men have more advantages coming up than women do too. So to try to compare them by the same standard, I think is it's tricky, man, because the intention is right. but it's still neglecting the years, the decades of patriarchal just suppression, right? So,
Prieeyya,
I think that there's, I'm just like shifting gears a little bit here. There's probably a cultural aspect to all of this too, right?
No, totally.
Like movies like traditionally Hollywood or the Oscars or Grammys and award shows like this have been predominantly run and supported by white old males, right? And I like a movie that I can relate to that sort of challenged this idea this year, or had a lot of support backing minority representation on the silver screen, is Crazy Rich Asians. Right?
Yes.
Like
it got no nominations.
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah,
and it's actually a good movie. Like,
I thought so. I'm from that part of the world, from Malaysia and Singapore, and I identified completely with it. Right? Like it was so cool to see. Although I'm.
You're not crazy. You're not rich. You're not Asian.
She only identified with the landmarks. She's from Singapore.
Anyway,
way to expose her.
You guys suck.
No, but that also came out.
There's a huge cultural factor to it as well, in addition to the gender lens.
So somebody did tweet out right after the Oscars nominations came out about, number one, the fact that no females are nominated for Best Director, as well as a lot of visual representation movies that were getting a lot of buzz. So Crazy Rich Asians was another one.
Huge. They gross so much.
Yeah.
I think.
That's just a testament to the fact that, the Academy isn't representative of what the market is like gloving, right?
Yeah.
Like if this movie did numbers, then why isn't it being reflected in like award shows?
And it got good reviews, and it was well put together, and I think even from a cultural standpoint, it was quite the
It was funny too.
Yeah, it was a funny
nice
movie.
I saw white people in the theater.
Yeah,
it was interesting to see how they were able to put together a majority Asian cast, and put together a pretty solid story, and that was one that came up as well, and it'll be interesting to see how this progresses. Obviously another thing that's at play is they don't have a host right now, and that's the Kevin Hart incident with his jokes being exposed from a few years ago that were going against the LGBTQ community. So there's a lot around the Oscars that's not the prettiest right now.
Yeah.
But
it's also like, this is, I think the framework to look at this is also the pace that we're changing as a community and being more receptive and acceptable. And tolerant to and inclusive.
So are you saying like organizations aren't?
They're not keeping up to that pace. They're not iterating enough. They're not self-reflecting enough. And that's prevalent not just in Hollywood, but in business and tech and entrepreneurship.
Especially when you look at a lot of like boards, venture capitalists. You look at that, and how much diversity do you actually see? Right.
And like with that, like if you go to a venture fund and they look like an old white dude, those old white dudes are more likely to invest in younger white dudes, right? They're not going to invest in like young black women. And then that's the whole catch-22 thing again.
It starts to add up.
The money's just going back into people who look like them.
Well, I think that's a good segue to another pop culture topic I wanted to talk about, since we're going to talk about investments, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists. Another thing that's making news this week, and it's funny because I actually watched it while I was at a bachelor party this past weekend, so it was quite the bachelor party. The debacle that was the FYRE Festival.
Oh God!
Ja Rule and our boy Billy, Billy McFarland. It's quite the disaster. There's a documentary that's like making huge waves on Netflix called FYRE, and then there's obviously the Hulu one called FYRE Fraud.
Yes.
And unfortunately, here in Canada, we don't have access to Hulu unless someone gets it through other means. But let's talk about the Netflix documentary, because this has actually opened up a lot of can of worms. Specifically, not only around this festival, which I think we all remember seeing the social media debacle around.
It was so good.
But GQ came out with a very.
Did you just say it was so good?
Yeah.
What, the festival or? I was like, you went
store, man.
I was like, I swear I saw.
I got a cabana. Where's a cabana, man? Yeah, I love the cheese sandwiches, though, man.
GQ came out with an article called "The Netflix and Hulu FYRE Festival Documentaries Are Horror Stories About the Tech Industry," and knowing both of your ties within the tech space here locally, I thought it'd be great to talk about it, because the one thing that people do not glamorize is the ugly side of entrepreneurship, especially when people get successful. And it's always questionable how this happens. One thing I'll talk about when it comes to the Netflix version is, it's pretty apparent that Billy McFarland, all of his businesses were kind of shady, for the most part. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, there was a lot of money mismanagement, a lot of, a lot of
waste in VC dollars.
Yeah, like a lot of waste in VC dollars. There was somebody he kept going to for funding for the FYRE Festival. There's also a lot of misrepresentation when it comes to stuff around him not coming out on bail and starting a brand new scam business. When it came to selling tickets. Like, just fascinating to see how he was like this serial scam entrepreneur that just kept going and going, and who knows, he might be continuing as he faces jail time in a few months, because I think it's just within him. But then you got the Ja Rule's involvement, which for me, being a big hip hop fan, I was laughing because I still remember Ja Rule getting bodied by 50 Cent in his old rap beef. So I was like, Ja Rule can never just win at life. Like, he's always gonna do his issues.
Destiny.
But I want to get your perspectives on it. Like, this is to me, when I watched it, this was greed. Greed at its absolute fullest. This is also somebody like Billy who got very power hungry, and you saw his influence in being able to get people to do things they didn't want to do, and him not taking no as an answer, and also being very stubborn to the point where you weren't willing to throw in the towel. And it's funny because all three of us were talking about how we might know certain entrepreneurs that are like that get completely stubborn when it comes to an idea that's not working. So, Astawa, give me your thoughts on the documentary and just some of the key lessons that you learned when it comes to the side that they showed on the tech industry.
It's interesting to note that all the businesses that Billy started, Magnesis, FYRE, they were all selling an appearance.
Yes.
People who bought into Magnesis bought those cars because they wanted to seem exclusive and like look like they were part of some club. Yeah. Right? People who bought FYRE tickets wanted to go hang out with these models and go to this exclusive island. They all bought an image, and I think that speaks to the kind of person Billy is. Like, he never had any, like, the actual FYRE media company, I think they only netted profit like $60K. Yeah, bro, like, we do $60K all the time, man. Like
Astawa does $60K in his sleep.
That's like a Popeyes. All of his businesses were around an appearance. Like, he was always selling an appearance as well. And so I watched the documentary last night. I loved it, and I immediately went to go sign up for Hulu. And to my disappointment, it was not available in Canada. So Hulu, man, you got customers. We got money to give you.
Yeah, bring Hulu to Canada so we can watch this documentary. At least give us a free trial, and then I won't sign up after.
So the thing I got from the FYRE thing was that it doesn't matter. These people, these investors, these loan banks and all that, they still put money behind people who don't have real businesses or anything. Yeah. There's so much of this fake it till you make it thing that people actually like live out. They live a fake thing, get so much money behind it. So let me down a rabbit hole of other people who do similar things. Like, I started looking at articles about Juicero, and I'm like, Juicero was a garbage business, but they got so much fun. They got like $40 million from people like Google, all these huge funds in Silicon Valley. And then I looked at other entrepreneurs who got so much funding by like all these big companies, but they never really had a big business. Like, it's a shame that this is just the culture of entrepreneurship right now.
Well, especially since a lot of people in the Netflix documentary talk about how, because Billy he's only 28 years old, so he's very young. And what's interesting is if you talk to a lot of the team members and people that knew him, they were saying, when you met him, you thought he was a genius. You thought he was the next like Zuckerberg, like somebody who's just going to maybe Zuckerberg's not the great example, but hey, maybe it's relevant here. Everyone thought he was the next big thing when it comes to entrepreneurship, mainly because of the way he carried himself. And it's funny when you think about, Astawa, your point around him selling just the look and feel of things. I thought it was interesting that he got his team to back him on ideas around, hey, when I go to meetings, I have to be in the fanciest cars, I have to be in the fanciest suits. Yeah. Because I it's funny, the way I was comparing that to is a lot of real estate agents that I know. Yes. That very much are leasing big time vehicles and are taking their clients to like high end restaurants because of perception, which keeps coming up on this podcast. It's a
Yeah.
perception thing because you want people to feel like, number one, hey, you know what you're doing, but number two, that you're bigger than you actually are.
Yeah.
And that's what I found very, very intriguing. Prieeyya, what was your thoughts?
I was so angry I didn't finish it.
Really? Right? So what made you angry about it?
So I think in one word I would call it heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially the
because
stories of the people. Yeah.
And well, I wouldn't say I empathize with Billy at all.
Yeah.
No,
Right?
fuck Billy.
Right? It's heartbreaking for me because it's a gross misrepresentation of what entrepreneurship is.
Yeah.
Right? Entrepreneurship is hard, especially for people like me who are still trying to be
Yeah.
entrepreneurs
Yeah.
and still very much on the climb.
Yeah.
The misrepresentation is that we spend a lot of days alone. We battle our families to do it.
Yeah.
We spend every day is a 12 a.m., 1 a.m. day.
It is.
Do you know what I
Totally
mean?
is,
It's a 15, 16-hour day.
Yeah.
And sure, I get it. Like, I'm still on the rise, but and so are a whole demographic of people who are aspiring entrepreneurs. But
Yeah, you're on a wave.
our wave.
No pun.
But people who've already exited one or two times, right? Who've already achieved entrepreneurial success here and there. I think it's on them to emphasize how entrepreneurship is less so the Lambos and the watches and the girls, and more so the focused time and effort and intention and intentional work behind bringing a vision to life, right? I think what Billy represents is, so in a lot of ways, he was selling a vision, right? And with Magnesis as well, he was selling this vision of a hi-fi society or access to a hi-fi society, right? But selling a vision, a lot of entrepreneurs do. I do that too, right? Like,
yeah, selling a vision is 100% part of entrepreneurship. But
Yeah.
if you can't follow through and execute, if you can't walk the walk, then you're doing disservice to everybody else who calls themselves an entrepreneur too, man.
Right? Like a real life
Yeah.
example is before, like, so last year, for example, with our wave, we did 3 events. Before we did those 3 events, I had to go sell to the likes of RBC, the city of Brampton, Ryerson. I had to go and sell them a vision, right? But if you take that too far, which I
Yeah.
think is what Billy did,
Yep.
if you take the vision too far where it's almost bordering delusion,
Yeah.
that's where it becomes horrible, right? Because that's not entrepreneurship. And for me, it's sad because there's so many talented entrepreneurs out there who are actually creating or building solutions that push society forward, right? And I don't think they get enough of a voice.
You know, I do want to make a correction here. So he is in jail right now. So I just want to clarify that. He's serving 6 years, mainly because, I should say, serving 6 years trying to run another scam while out on bail. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is,
What the
totally
fuck?
sucks.
He's
Like,
probably
what?
he's probably in a white collar prison somewhere, and
Oh yeah, and
it's
those
not.
and those white collar prisons aren't prisons for the
No,
most part.
no.
But you know, one thing I'll say about this article that's very thought provoking towards the end is pretty much the author of this article, who is let me double check. Her name is Jaya Sagzina. She said at the very end that there will always be another McFarlane to take his place, which I find very interesting.
Yeah.
Because again, you know, as entrepreneurs, all three of us are entrepreneurs. You know, again, this gives us a bad name. It really, it really ruins our
totally does.
reputation, and
Yeah.
it's the same thing. You know, it's the same thing when you deal with a wedding vendor, right? And let's say you're trying to get a photographer, and a photographer, you know, gyps you on something. It's very easy to assume that all photographers are like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that's the harsh reality of something like this that gets glorified is ultimately you're putting a negative light on
We
those
tend to
hard
People who are
generalize.
actually doing it, man.
Yeah.
Like there's people like Prieeyya out here, like not sleeping, running around
Yeah,
on like ice caps all
exactly.
day, and then you have people like Billy who just wears the cape of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So how
But-
how can we better suss that out? Like, what do you recommend?
I think we need to tell the stories, like show the like 3 a.m. is where you're staring into your MacBook
Yeah.
screen. Share your failures.
There are a lot of days where well, I can speak for myself where it like I hit the point of exhaustion daily.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And that's not just me.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that to sound like, oh, I'm like
I'm
trying so hard, right? But that's like anyone who's trying to make something happen, right? Like you love it so much, your why is so strong that you need to be successful. I think Billy is the perfect example of a demonstration of entrepreneurship culture or the hype behind entrepreneurship at the highest level.
Yeah.
But this Billy versions of Biggie
Biggie Smalls is the
Billy McFarland exist today locally in our societies.
Yeah.
There's so many people who have the position.
I got a Billy down the street from me, B.
Yeah, like have
wow,
I'm gonna leave that in.
have the,
shots fired.
They have the position, they have the network, they have the influence within society to perpetuate entrepreneurship hype. And that's what's detrimental, right? Like entrepreneurship hype is all of this oh, we're so cool, we work so hard, but again we work so hard with no sort of result or anything that comes out of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or we're not, like, as entrepreneurs, I think we're designed or hardwired to be of service to society. And if like micro Billy McFarlands exist within our society that perpetuate this hype, I think to kill it at the root, they should be exiled.
No, that's, and again, in my sort of time meeting with different people, because I've always welcomed the opportunity to network, I think I've gotten better in sussing out people like this that are just
they're a dime a dozen.
Yeah, and you have a conversation and you get like this guy seems off, or this doesn't seem like it's all what it's cracked up to be. And I remember the last week on our episode, we were talking about the viral egg, and we were talking about, then it went to the conversation around like Instagram followers. And now I'm starting to have that sense when I see social media accounts where I'm like, there's no way you have this many followers if I know people that don't know who you are. Like, it's just, and you're in the same circle as me. Like, it's one of those things where I'm now, again, maybe I'm too paranoid, or maybe I'm not giving the benefit of doubt to a lot of people, but I'm really basing it on my experience when I meet someone. And if they come out with swagger like a Billy that, rubs me the wrong way, then I've already made up my mind.
Yeah, man. So one thing we do have to credit FYRE for is like all these titles now on Instagram saying, oh, paid partnership or ad.
Yeah, that's true.
FYRE gave life to that because of all that influencer stuff.
Because the influencer stuff, which is really smart. Because I think that, like, obviously the influencers, there's arguments going back and forth that, hey, the influencers sold a dream and it wasn't true. But at the end of the day,
they're hired for a job.
Yeah, they're hired for a job, and that's what that's what it's about.
Yeah. There was a lot of talk about, oh, the models, they were negligent too. They should have known what they were buying into. But sure, okay, I see the merit in that. But they were doing their job. They were hired to do something, and they went and did it. Yeah, right.
It's just fascinating, and this is totally off topic, but somewhat related because FYRE is a music festival. Is the amount of music festivals I've seen in the last few years that have not survived. Like, there's a music festival I like going to in Toronto called Field Trip, and I just saw a post yesterday saying that they're not going to continue in 2019. They're going to take a break and maybe come back in 2020. And it's like, I hope the one thing that people realize when it comes to watching this FYRE Festival documentary, outside of all the noise, is just the difficulty to pull off major events. And we've all been there. We've all been a part of big events, and we've all seen them, take our life away, and we've all seen the grind that comes with really executing. But that's the one thing that I hope a lot of people realize is, if you're going to do something massive and something different, it's a large undertaking, and you better be prepared to deal with a lot of the stuff that is going to come up.
Yeah.
This might have not happened if Billy had a PMP. If he was a project manager,
or if you had any basic sense, or if you had a money manager, like a good financial planner,
get a CPA, bro.
Yeah.
I think one last point I want to quickly make is Astawa has been a big pusher of this for me as well. Is people on the rise, like people who are actually trying to make something happen for themselves, and there's merit behind their idea. They're actually trying to solve something real.
Yeah.
Their stories don't get shared.
They don't.
Or they don't share their stories.
They don't,
I'm guilty of that, right?
Yeah.
I just do the work, and
you do it in silence.
I push forward, and I do it in silence.
That's
right?
the best way.
But the thing is, stories like this get shared, right? Like stories
like yours don't get shared.
No.
And this goes back to the whole representation with the Oscars thing. If young Malaysian, Indian, brown girls aren't seeing like, other people who look at them working and rising, then they're not going to do it either.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But if they see Billy McFarland's, then they're going to think, oh, I can't do that because I don't look like this douchebag.
Yeah, I think a good point to make or a good argument to make is for all the people on the rise who have merit behind what they're trying to do is to speak up more. And I'm definitely 100%, 110% guilty of that, right? I'm still learning from people like Astawa to, as his podcast is titled, Share Your Drafts.
Woo! Right? Podcast plug.
Hey, it's my podcast. Okay, we'll do plugs after.
It's a good framework to think about because like Jeff Bezos, for example, we didn't hear about him until he was successful.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't hear about the rise.
And I remember
people are not interested in the rise.
And I think it's fascinating because people are always like, as a music fan, I'm always interested to see the behind the scenes of the song. Like for J. Cole, when Revenge of the Dreamers, for like January 6th to 16th, he had all these social media photos of these personal end bites, and you got to see the making of the album. But to your point, when it comes to a business, people don't want to see you up in the morning at 3 a.m. still like can't sleep and working on stuff because it's not sexy, right? It's not glamorous. And likewise, like how often are entrepreneurs do they want that to be seen as well?
The real ones just want to get the work done.
It's fascinating. Like I know a couple of and we'll close this out to one more topic, but I know a couple of organizations do like effed up nights where like they'll get people to share their failures, and I like that. I like that a lot. I also feel like there's a fine balance because you don't want to keep glorifying failures because then again you could be the worst entrepreneur in the world that's just gonna like blow money and be delusional, and then you'll go to an effed up night and be like, okay, it's okay, I'll move on, right? Like I think the key thing here is learning.
It's self-awareness too. Like you said it 100 times, like fail fast and learn from it, but you gotta be self-aware enough to know like, yo, this isn't working, I need to pivot, I need to do something different.
Going back, actually, this is a good segue to our point earlier about exposure. I think entrepreneurship is hyped up as a career right now, like it's really cool right now, right? But again, like the individual or whoever it is in the world has to know themselves to know whether like
they're cut out
within in their circumstance in life right now, is entrepreneurship something that they can afford to pursue? Right? Or are they more the job type? Or like, are they the type that Gary Vee talks about this distinction a lot between a real like OG entrepreneur and someone who thinks entrepreneurially but really likes the structure of a 9-to-5.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Totally.
But that's on you to figure out. Do you know what I mean? I would be an advocate of that. Like, how can we catch them early on in school? Can we, like, what education or awareness needs to go behind this, like, being more self-aware piece, right? Are there tests like the Myers-Briggs for like personality tests that we can take for careers, right? Like, can we be binary of are you an entrepreneur or not?
If I can add my own personal experience, like that's kind of the journey I've been on over the last few months. And to your point, like I came down to it where I was like, you know what, I like working full time and having a side hustle. And if I keep working on the side hustle,
there's nothing wrong with that. Right?
Because eventually, if your side hustle catches on, it'll become your full time thing. And I think I've come to terms with that because I've always had people like, oh, you should start your own business. Oh, you're so good at this. And it's not. I was flattered by that, but then I know myself, and I was like, no, because you know I like structured environments. Like I like being able to clock in, clock out, and then have a life outside of that where it allows me to follow my passion. And a lot of that comes with just self-discovery.
That's huge that you know that. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of youth today, not to diminish the opportunity.
Nav's like a youth next year.
Hey, I'm telling you, I figured that out at age 30. So, again, you guys are quite younger than me, but no, I think to your point.
I was just saying that a lot of youth today, because of all the hype behind entrepreneurship and all the exposure that like these success stories get, they suddenly are identifying themselves as entrepreneurs without even critically thinking of
what does it take?
Yeah, what does it take? I think a key, for me, I boil it down to one value, and that's willingness. Like, entrepreneurs are willing to go and the extra mile for everything. Right, and
it's just who you are,
and wait it out. They're ready to wait it out for at least. There are patterns that I've seen that among successful entrepreneurs, it takes about 6 years to hit that point where you can say that I've brought something from 0 to 1.
Wow. Yeah,
6 years. Are you willing to spend 6 years to master your craft?
Yeah.
Right. And if not, that's okay.
Yeah, it is.
That's okay.
Totally is. On that note, we're going to wrap this episode up, guys. I want to thank you both for joining me for this great discussion. This was very fascinating. I thought we touched on a lot of interesting topics here on New Theory Radio. I love hearing your theories. And I would love the viewers to learn more about, what both of you are working on. So, Astawa, let's begin with you. How can the viewer, what are you doing currently? And how can the listeners, pay attention and maybe connect with you if they want to learn more?
For sure. If anything I said tonight, rings true with you, or you love what I said, the jokes I made and stuff, hit me up on Instagram at a.stawa. I would love to connect and grab a coffee, just get to know what you're doing. Right now I'm building the city of Brampton in the startup community. So if you're in the PO region looking for a great place to grow your company, come to City Brampton. Also, I'm building DXM Creative.
He's literally building. Like, he has his sleeves rolled up. Like, he literally after this, he's going right to downtown Brampton. And he's just building away.
Yeah. So DXM Creative as well, my digital marketing agency, building that. And yeah, just connect with me, man. I'd love to meet more cool people who are doing cool things.
And you got a podcast, right?
Yes. It's in the works. Revising it. Share Your Drafts podcast. Look that up on iTunes, Spotify. Literally anywhere you get your podcast, we'll have these two on soon as well.
Awesome. Prieeyya, you're always working on a lot, but you actually have an event taking place next week on the 31st.
Yeah.
Let us know what's going on with you and Our Way Pub.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm working on building sort of, the way I'm framing it now is as a talent incubator.
Sweet.
Where we design and develop programs to identify and nurture potential innovators, right? I think the premise is that the academic structures that exist today is lagging behind how fast technology is evolving. So in turn, talent isn't being developed well enough to be adaptable to that. So that's a big problem I'm working towards solving. We do right now, there are two sort of things that are in the works and launching. One is we do a bunch of events to continue building our community, and all around the topic of how this fourth industrial revolution, as it's dubbed, will affect society at large, and sort of trying to build a community around that. But also we're launching our programs soon, and our programs are funded by RBC in collaboration with Ryerson University and Sheridan College. I'm also... little plug, the ED, Executive Director of Sikh Heritage Month. It's a huge festival that happens in Brampton.
Congrats on that, by the way. That's awesome.
Thanks. But
humble brag.
It's not limited to people who are only within the community or only Sikh. We are very much so promoters of interfaith and intergenerational dialogue, and it's a huge. We've in the past, some names that we've had include Rupi Kaur, Jinder Mahal, and the likes of. I guess prominent figures in the Sikh community like that, but it's a great way to see who's out there in the community and a great way to network. So, two little plugs. I'm also working on launching a podcast, but it's in the works, but not launched yet. It's called The Future Of, and it's probably going to explore how technology or emerging technology will affect both us at the micro level and at the macro level.
And then your event next week is taking place where?
So it's happening at the Thompson Building, that's 65 Queen Street West, in Toronto, right opposite of the Toronto sign. The event is called Augment, and what it is a panel discussion on how Industry 4.0 is going to affect the Canadian labor market. It's going to affect the impact on skills and the gender gap, and how the widespread adoption of technologies might affect developing economies. So we have 3 panelists, one from IBM, one from Naukri, that's an AI startup, and one from Diversio, that's also a startup. So yeah, if tickets are live on Eventbrite, you can just Google Augment Toronto, and that's our space. So the space that we're hosting the event is actually our own office space.
Awesome.
But yeah.
Shout outs to Watershed Partners.
Yes,
I was actually
big
there
time.
last week. Great space, great view, and no, I think that event next week's gonna be awesome. And both of you guys keep at it. Keep moving and shaking. Everywhere in every aspect that you're targeting, and keep influencing people like me to keep going.
What do you mean? You keep doing your thing.
No, I was saying the energy, the energy is definitely contagious, and it's great to see
you too. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm
always gonna be here. I'm always gonna be here.
No, platforms for conversations like this, believe it or not, don't exist a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, critical conversation and critical thought like platforms. I so appreciate that.
No, and you guys are great. And I think, again, the whole premise of New Theory Radio is everyone has a theory on something. So that's what I like to foster here. And I think we touched on some great topics. And you guys will definitely be back. And we'll do a little recap and see how much Popeyes Astawa has ate since it's recorded.
How to keep track.
Yeah, but if you want to connect with us on New Theory Radio, it's at New Theory Radio on every social media, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter as well. You can connect with me on Twitter at Nanwa, as well as on Instagram at Nav Nanwa. I should really keep those consistent, but I feel like at Nanwa is taken on Instagram. Don't ask why. I tracked it. It's already gone.
My name's taken on Instagram too.
Really, eh?
Like, who else is the name of Astawa?
I don't know. It's crazy. And then do subscribe to New Theory Radio on iTunes. Leave us a review. That definitely helps from a feedback standpoint. Again, this is a podcast that's been in the works for quite some time, so I'd love to get your feedback on the episodes, and if you have any thoughts on any of the topics that we discussed here today. And we'll be back again here next week on iTunes, live from the CFRE studios. Thanks so much for tuning in, and see you all later. Bye.
Yes.
So smooth. I'm going to keep that in. Okay. See you guys later. Bye.
At American University, we don't just hope for change, we create it. We don't just dream of a better world, we make it a reality. With a graduate degree from AU, you'll access expert faculty and connections throughout DC to develop skills and experience to turn your passion into purpose. And that purpose can make all the difference in your career. Discover the difference a degree makes at american.edu/grad school.